How you doing? So today I think we'll look at a few of Herbert's poems where well, they all have surprises, but we'll look at a couple that have to do with structure of language and structure of verses itself, kind of to not as much as Easter Wings and The Altar are shaped poems, but he's certainly working with shape and really mindful of how it looks on the page. There are two, I guess, ways to consider the reception of poems. One is in the oral tradition, I guess in slam poetry is our version of that now, which slam poetry very often doesn't work on the page, and page poetry on the page sometimes doesn't go over very well in a slam situation. And certainly, I mean, this is just 20th century, 21st century complaints. You know, I always make fun of, and so and I'm glad other people started making fun of the poet voice. I don't get the poet voice. You know, the nimble diver with his side cuts through the working waves. You know, they get weird. You know, I don't get that. But we have to wonder how these poems were read out loud. I mean, but obviously, Herbert is working from that manuscript tradition we talked about, where these poems are to be read and not heard as much as, well, I guess heard too, but heard not as much as read, which is interesting because Herbert was also apparently a very gifted musician, a lutenist and composer, and I guess some of his poems he set to or some of his verses he set to music. And Ralph Vaughan Williams, the great composer, also did. I think he took 5 of Herbert's poems and set them to music as well. And there's certainly a musicality to them, rhythm. It's really easy in reading his poems out loud to catch the rhythm. Right? Some poems it's not so easy. But let's look at, not that we'll read the whole thing, but Colossians 3:3. Not well, in the Bible you can look at it too, but it says the same thing here. And in this poem, it's really a block of verse. It's not attractive as a shaped poem. But here's the surprise, right? And you can see this, I won't read the whole poem, that he hides the line of Colossians and a diagonal across each line. So you read it, and Suffolk's got a couple of poems like this that you can read in different directions. So you can read the poem line by line, which is fine. It works just that way. But the real secret is with the words he represents in italics, which go in at a diagonal, which is a quote from Colossians 3:3. My life is hid in him. That is my treasure. And so it's a thing Herbert likes to do. He does it elsewhere too. Let's take a look at Jesu, which is a little bit later. This one it's short too, I can read it. Jesu is in my heart. His sacred name is deeply carved there. But the other week a great affliction broke the little frame, even all to pieces, which I went to seek, and first I found the corner where was J, after where ES, and next where U was graved. When I had got these parcels, instantly I sat me down to spell them, and perceived that to my broken heart he was I ease you, and to my whole is Jesu. Right? Kind of a little pun there on the spelling of Jesu. That the name of Jesus was written on his heart, and when it broke, because of what's his favorite word? Affliction. It broke into those 3 pieces, and he saw it. It says, I ease you. And this is another case of the still small voice. Right? In the midst of affliction, I ease you. Right? Let's take a look now at I should say, I hope you're not just reading the poems we're covering. You should read the whole book, cover to cover. It takes a while, though. I mean, even in graduate school, our professors gave us 2 weeks to do this one because it's so rich and it's so much to it, and you could take more than two. I mean, you could work with the temple over a long time. I think what's wonderful about poetry is entering into it, the contemplation of it, as we learned earlier. But here's another one where he plays with shape and form. Paradise. I bless thee, Lord, because I grow among thy trees, which in a row to thee both fruit and order owe. What open force or hidden charm can blast my fruit or bring me harm, while the enclosure is thine arm? Enclose me still for fear I start. Be to me rather sharp and tart, then let me want thy hand and art. When thou dost greater judgment spare, and with thy knife but prune and pare, even fruitful trees more fruitful are. Such sharpness shows the sweetest friend, such cuttings rather heal than rend, and such beginnings touch their end. Paradise. And he shows who does the pruning, right? God does the pruning, right? I am the vine and you are the branches, right? So God's pruning. And what happens when you prune fruit trees or grapevines? You improve them to give them better health. So also, not only that, but there's this also a kind of a way to read this about affliction or troubles or cares, right? It's pruning, right? Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. It's another example of how Herbert does these things with shape, really mindful of how it looks on a page. And it's charming, too. I mean, you see those, he has the words in capitals at the end, and you see those short, and you just can't help but smile. It's the prize in the Cracker Jack. Now, like prizes in Cracker Jacks, they're, it's not like you found $100 bill, but it gives you a smile, right? It gives you a smile, and that's what grace is. It's the little things, right? It's not this, and this is in static spirituality. It's these little things you pay attention to and which reveal grace. It's not an angel appearing to you or a vision of Christ or the Virgin. It's something little. It's a still small voice. Right? It's a signal grace, you'd say. But I want to look at another poem where he turns his own still small voice convention on its head. And this is the poem Artillery. It's a longer poem. I don't want to read, well, it's not that long, but I don't want to read the whole thing. But I do want to point out that something really different is going on here. It starts, as I one evening sat before my cell, methoughts a star did shoot into my lap. I rose and shook my clothes, as knowing well that from small fires comes oft no small mishap. When suddenly I heard one say, do as thou usest, disobey. Expel good motions from thy breast, which have the face of fire, but end in rest. Now, it's interesting to me, and critics didn't catch this until I caught it, I think, that this is weird for Herbert, because if we just saw it in a Jesu, and we'll see in some other poems, and we also saw it in one of the Jordan poems, when the still small voice shows up in a George Herbert poem, it shows up at the end, because the speaker of the poem goes through some kind of periods of affliction or trouble or whatever is going on, or he's angry or whatever happens to be, and the still small voice comes in at the end and says, it's okay, trust me. Here it comes in the beginning, but it doesn't come with reassurance. It says, do as thou usest, disobey. Go right ahead, dude. Expel good motions from thy breast, which have the face of fire, but end in rest. Maybe I will read some more of this. And then he says, I who had heard of music in the spheres, but not of speech in stars, and began to muse. But turning to my God, whose ministers the stars and all things are, if I refuse, dread Lord, said I, so oft my good, then I refuse not even with blood to wash away my stubborn thought, for I will do or suffer what I ought. But I have also stars and shooters too, born where thy servants both artilleries use. My tears and prayers night and day do woo and work up to thee, yet thou dost refuse. Not but I am, I must say still, much more obliged to do thy will than thou to grant mine, but because thy promise now hath even set thee thy laws. Then we are shooters both, and thou dost deign to enter combat with us, and contest with thine own clay. But I would parley fain. Shun not my arrows, and behold my breast. Yet if thou shunnest I am thine, I must be so if I am mine. There is no articling with thee. I am but finite, yet thine infinitely. Now, what's interesting to me is, I think the voice that comes at the beginning is the voice of Lucifer, or Satan, who also, as the speaker says, comes from God, right? Well, he's the adversary. Right? Which is why in the second stanza the speaker says, he's got the star right there, but he turns to God from the star. So God is not the star. God is the star is the tempter. So it's kind of interesting where he plays against his own convention in this poem, which is puzzling, but kind of interesting. I shouldn't say puzzling, but easy to miss that. To think he's using the same voice that he uses at other times, but it's not that voice. It comes at the wrong place. Now here's a poem, for example, probably one of his best poems, and a guy who was such a great poet. To say one of the best poems is saying something, but that's the poem "The Collar." Now there's also a pun here in the title. It's the collar, meaning that which a priest wears. It's the collar, which is like the thing that holds you on a leash. It's a pun on collar, or being choleric, because unlike most George Herbert poems, he's pissed off in this one, right? He's angry, so it's his collar is coming out. And it's also the caller, right? The caller, the one who calls. So let's read it. I struck the board and cried, "No more, I will abroad." What? Shall I ever sigh and pine? My lines in life are free, free as the road, loose as the wind, as large as store. Shall I be still in suit? Have I no harvest but a thorn to let me blood, and not restore what I have lost with cordial fruit? Sure, there was wine before my sighs did dry it. There was corn before my tears did drown it. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? No flowers, no garlands gay, all blasted, all wasted? Not so, my heart. But there is fruit, and thou hast hands. Recover all thy sigh-blown age of double pleasures. Leave thy cold dispute of what is fit and not. Forsake thy cage, thy rope of sands which petty thoughts have made, and made to thee good cable to enforce and draw, and be thy law, while thou didst wink and wouldst not see. Away, take heed, I will abroad. Call on thy death's head there. Tie up thy fears. He that forbears to suit and serve his need deserves his load. Right? Wow, is he mad? But as I raved and grew more fierce and wild at every word, methoughts I heard one calling, "Child," and I replied, "My lord." It's such an extraordinary poem. And one of the things in this poem is, trying to nail down what the form is. I don't even know. This one has given literary critics a lot of trouble because most of Herbert is very conscientious about form. I mean, he does, certainly experiments with form, but there's always form. This one looks a little chaotic. It changes. Well, why does it change? Well, maybe we can say this is his one ecstatic poem, and maybe this is why he doesn't like ecstasy so much, because he's out of control, the speaker, right? But look, one of the things he does, right? My lines in life are free, free as the road. So he's also commenting on the form of this poem. Loose as the wind, as large as store. Shall I still be in suit? Right? Why? And this is like, don't we all get into this? Why me? What? I've given you everything. What are you doing? Why? I'm giving you everything. Want more? I've already given you everything. But no, look what he does, though. And this George Herbert, this heavily Eucharistic poet, down around line 10. Sure, there was wine before my sighs did dry it. There was corn before my tears did drown it. Now, of course, wine and corn, which is wheat, right? But the wine, his sighs dry the wine. So the wine, this liquid, right, becomes dried. Now, bread's supposed to be dry. Wine's supposed to be wet. So he's inverted the Eucharist here. He's turned it to its opposite. It's kind of startling. There was corn before my tears did drown it. He inverts the Eucharist. I mean, that, for George Herbert, that's like the highest crime. He turns it into its opposite. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? No flowers, no garlands gay? All blasted, all wasted? Right? What's in it for me? And this, you might say, this might have in him. This could be an earlier poem from when his opportunities in the secular world kind of came to a grinding halt. And this is what drove him to the priesthood. It's hard to say. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's in this poem. Right? And so all this anger, frustration, until you get to the last two lines, methought I heard one calling child. And I replied, my Lord. Right? Still small voice shows up. And it shows up in the poem where the speaker least deserves it. And of course, we don't deserve God's grace. That's the point Herbert's trying to make. It's freely given, right? But it's so beautiful the way he shows it here. And he rhymes child with my Lord. It's an off rhyme to show the frustration, but also it gives resolution in a weird time. Usually, off rhymes are used to build tension in poetry, but this is a strange instance where it comes in and releases tension. So brilliant. I mean, kind of a virtuoso piece as far as poetic verse. Now let's look at another one, the Pulley. Right? Which is kind of a parody of the myth of Pandora. The Pulley. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessings standing by, let us, said he, pouring up all we can. Let the world's riches which dispersed lie contract into a span. So there's an idea of the microcosm, the macrocosm, right? Which Herbert accepts. So strength first made a way, then beauty flowed, then wisdom, honor, pleasure. When almost all was out, God made a stay, receiving that alone of all his treasure, rest in the bottom lay. For if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, he would adore my gifts instead of me, and rest in nature, not the God of nature, so both should losers be. Yet let him keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Let him be rich and weary, that at least, if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. How nice, huh? Let him keep the rest. Well, now, he doesn't mean keep rest, which is in the bottom of the box. It's keep all the other stuff. So, but the pun is, of course, keep the rest. And this is George Herbert's sense of humor. I just love it, right? And I do love this ending 2 lines. If goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. You know, this is the poet of affliction. He knows it well. And let's go through his closing sequence here, which I think is pretty extraordinary. You'll notice throughout the temple, like we saw with the, the architectural sequence. He has a sequence of poems all related in theme. But how's he going to end this book, The Temple? Well, here's how he's going to end the temple with death and what comes after, the last things, right? I won't read the poem Death. Even before that, the elixir. What's going to, he's sick. Give me the elixir. Then death comes. So let's look at Doomsday. Come away, make no delay. Summon all the dust to rise till it stir and rub the eyes. While this member jogs the other, each one whispering, "Love you, brother?" Sorry. Come away, make this day. Dust, alas, no music feels, but thy trumpet. Then it kneels as peculiar notes and strains cure tarantula's raging pains. Come away, O make no stay. Let the graves make their confession, lest at length they plead possession. Flesh's stubbornness may have read that lesson to the grave. Flesh's stubbornness may have read that lesson to the grave. Come away, that thy flock doth stay. Some to winds their body lend, and then them may drown a friend. Some noisome vapors grow to a plague and public woe. Come away, help our decay. Man is out of order hurled, parceled out to all the world. Lord, thy broken consort raise, and the music shall be praise. And notice how this poem is kind of it's got a lilting, kind of sing-song thing to it, and it's Doomsday, right? But he turns it into a good thing, right? And I love that. And I laugh, right? Live you, brother? Hey, you made it too. All right. How's it going, brother? Live you, brother? And following Doomsday comes what? In the last things? Judgment. And it's short, I'll read it. Almighty Judge, how shall poor wretches brook thy dreadful look? Able a heart of iron to appall, when thou shalt call for every man's peculiar book. Another joke about the temple, right? Like every man's peculiar book. Here's my peculiar book. What others mean to do I know not well. Yet I hear tell that some will turn thee to some leaves therein, so void of sin that they may in merit shall excel. So it's the book of judgment. And I brought my own book to the book of judgment. I hope you like it. I made it for you. But I resolve, when thou shalt call for mine, that to decline, and thrust a testament into thy hand. Let that be scanned. There thou shalt find my faults are thine. Playing with God. And this is followed by heaven. Oh, who will show me those delights on high? Echo, I. Thou, echo, thou art mortal, all men know. No. Wert thou not born among the trees and leaves? Leaves. Are there any leaves that still abide? Bide. What leaves are they? Impart the matter wholly. Holy. Are holy leaves the echo then of bliss? Yes. Then tell me, what is that supreme delight? Light. Light to the mind, what shall the will enjoy? Joy. But are there cares in business with the pleasure? Leisure. Light, joy, and leisure, but shall they persever? Ever. I mean, really beautiful, simple little poem. And a child could find delight in this. And it's profound at the same time, this is so George Herbert, right? And then we'll finish up, Love 3. Now, Love 3, what a poem here. Now, little story. Simone Weil, the great French philosopher and mystic, this poem really figured importantly in her conversion. I think I got the books right behind me. Simone Weil. And what happened, Simone Weil, if you don't know, had been kind of an atheist communist, though from a secular Jewish family in France. But she was becoming more and more attracted to Christianity, to Catholicism in particular. And she met a priest who gave her a book of the Metaphysical poets. And she fell in love with this poem, Love 3 by Herbert. And she translated it into French, and she would say it all the time. She wrote in a letter to a priest that she suffered often from migraines, and she told the priest, often on the point of getting a migraine, I would recite this poem to myself. And, after all these recitations, it took on the virtue of a prayer. And it was during one of these recitations, she told the priest, and in her words, that Christ himself came down and took possession of me. So I'm sure George Herbert would like that. But wow. And this is what I think an agapeic reading of poetry does, in the best sense, is not only do we, our souls join with the soul of the poet, but in the best instances, our souls are united not only with the poet's soul, but with the intention of the poet, and which is, in this case, is God. And I think that's exactly what happened to Simone Weil. So let's look at the poem, and just a beautiful poem anyway. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack, from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful? Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand, and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says Love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says Love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. So this book, The Temple, that begins with a vision of the Eucharist, or I should say, it's prefaced with the promise of the Eucharist, begins with the vision of the Eucharist, of the altar, ends with the Eucharist, with the heavenly Eucharist. Right? And it's in the Anglican Church at this time, the communion was at the communion table. They didn't call it the altar, they called it the communion table. And here's Christ sitting at the table with the speaker, who's now, he died, was judged, gets to heaven, and this is the payoff. Love 3. But even then, notice he doesn't even feel. You made it to heaven, and you still don't feel. You're not worthy. You are so aware of. He's so aware of his own sinfulness, the speaker. Right. But the Lord says, bore the blame? Don't worry about it. Now, interesting too that this poem, unlike other poems, the still small voice is now not a still small voice. Now it's a conversation between the speaker and God, or Christ. Right? So I'm going to read it one more time. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack, from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful? Oh, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand, and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. You know not, says Love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says Love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. So this is the Eucharist that lasts forever. So pretty beautiful collection of poems and revolutionary. And look at this quiet revolutionary George Herbert, not a wave maker, you know what I mean? But and even he offers this book from the grave in a sense. And God bless Nicholas Ferrar for doing what he said he would do for his friend. Okay, all right. Well, that's pretty good. I think for enough for now. And next time we meet, we'll talk about Richard Crashaw, who was, if there's anyone who was an acolyte of George Herbert, it was Richard Crashaw. But he takes it into an importantly feminine direction. So we'll see you then.